Have you ever felt an eerie presence on campus? You're not alone. College is supposed to be a place of learning, laughter, and late-night study sessions. But some students encounter more than just textbooks and professors. Behind the ivy-covered walls and echoing hallways there are whispers, stories passed down in hushed tones, tales of ghostly figures, vanishing footsteps, and doors that slam with no wind. Tonight, we dive into 3 chilling true stories from university campuses, where the line between reality and nightmare is paper-thin. If you're new here, welcome to Mr. Darkveil, where shadows speak and truth hides in the dark. Subscribe now and turn on notifications, because some stories are meant to keep you up at night. Story 1. I never used to believe in ghosts. Not really. I liked horror movies and urban legends like anyone else, but to me, the idea of a spirit lingering in our world felt fictional. That changed during my second year at university, in the quiet, forgotten corners of our old campus library. It was mid-October. The air had started to take on that brittle chill, and the leaves outside rustled like dry whispers. Midterms were looming, and the only place I could truly concentrate was in the upper stacks of the library, an old wing nobody seemed to use anymore. I found that silence comforting. Too comforting, maybe. Our campus library had been built in phases. The modern section was all glass and clean lines, but the original stone building, nicknamed the Tomb by students, dated back to the late 1800s. It had narrow staircases, wrought iron railings, and shelves that stretched up to the ceiling like cathedral walls. They said it had once been a church. You could feel it, too, the solemnity of the place pressed in like a weight. That particular night I stayed late. Too late. I'd lost track of time reading for a cultural anthropology paper. The main lights had dimmed to night mode, but the desk lamps in the back stacks still worked. I didn't realize I was alone until I glanced at the clock on my laptop, 12:17 a.m. The library officially closed at midnight. No announcements, no security sweep, just locked doors and whoever forgot to leave. I should have panicked, but something kept me there. A strange pull. I packed up slowly, not entirely sure why I hesitated. That's when I heard the footsteps. Not behind me, but above me, on the floor that didn't exist. At least, it wasn't supposed to. There were only 3 floors in that wing. I was on the top one. The ceiling above was made of old wood and heavy beams, too low for another level. Yet I heard clear, deliberate footsteps pacing above me. Slow, precise, like someone patrolling the length of the library. Then, silence. I froze, ears straining. Maybe someone was still here. Maybe it was just an echo from downstairs. I gathered my things and moved toward the staircase, but when I stepped out into the aisle, all the lights went out. Every last one of them pitch black. I stood in that darkness, breathing hard, gripping the edge of my backpack. I didn't have my phone flashlight on, it was deep in my pocket, but even so, the total blackness was wrong. Not just a lack of light. It felt like something was pressing in, like the air had thickened, and then a sound, a rustle, the sound of pages turning. It was just a few feet away. "Hello?" I said, my voice too thin, too small, no response. Just that sound, so soft, like someone was flipping slowly through an old, brittle book. I pulled out my phone and turned on the flashlight. The beam cut through the dark in a sharp cone, revealing row after row of dusty shelves. I crept forward, heart pounding, breath loud in my ears. The sound was coming from one of the reading alcoves near the back, small wooden cubbies built into the wall, where students could read in silence. I moved toward it, the light shaking slightly in my hand. When I turned the corner and aimed the light into the nearest alcove, it was empty. No one there, just an open book on the desk, pages still moving. I don't mean that as a metaphor. The pages were turning, one by one, like an invisible finger was brushing them aside. My flashlight flickered, and I swear the temperature dropped 10 degrees. I stepped back instinctively, then turned and ran for the stairs. I didn't even look back. When I reached the main floor, I ran straight to the front doors. Locked, of course. I banged on the glass, but there was no one outside, no security, no movement. It felt like I was the only person left in the world. I considered breaking a window, but then I remembered the side maintenance exit. I ran through the winding corridors to the back hallway, praying the door hadn't been locked from the outside. As I reached it, I heard the footsteps again. This time, behind me, on the stairs, coming down. I threw open the side door and didn't stop running until I was halfway across campus. The next day, I returned to the library in daylight. I had to see if it had really happened. I even asked the librarian about the upstairs wing, mentioning that I'd stayed late. She frowned. "Nobody should have been in that wing," she said. "That area's only accessible by keycard now. We had it sealed off last year after an incident." "What kind of incident?" I asked. She hesitated, then lowered her voice. "There was a grad student. Loved to study alone in that same corner you mentioned. People say she was always reading the same book. Nobody's sure what it was. One night, she didn't come out. Security found her there the next morning, completely unresponsive. Just sitting, eyes wide, like she'd seen something she couldn't unsee. She dropped out, never spoke again. I felt cold all over. She leaned closer. Funny thing is, no one's ever been able to find that book, the one she was reading. But sometimes, late at night, students report hearing pages turning in that empty alcove. I didn't respond. I just nodded and walked out. I never studied there again. Even now, years later, I can't read in silence anymore. I need noise, music, people talking, traffic outside, anything to drown out the memory of that whispering darkness and the sound of invisible fingers leafing through pages that should have stayed shut. Because I don't think that book was ever meant to be opened, and I wasn't supposed to see it. Story 2. I never believed in ghosts. Not really. I mean, sure, I liked a good scary story as much as the next person, and I'd stayed up late watching horror movies in the dark just to spook myself. But deep down, I always assumed it was all just entertainment, fiction. That changed in my second year at Blackwood University. The campus is beautiful, historic. Ivy, crawling up old stone walls, tree-lined walkways, and buildings that dated back to the late 1800s. Students loved to boast about Blackwood's classic Gothic vibe. There were rumors, sure, stories passed around during orientation about haunted classrooms, the ghost in the old auditorium, but they never held much weight. That is, until I took a night shift as a resident assistant in Dunley Hall. Dunley was a decrepit, half-condemned dorm on the northern edge of campus, barely used anymore. They kept a few emergency rooms operational during overflow semesters, and this was one of those years. I was assigned to the overnight RA role, mostly just doing rounds, logging noise complaints, and making sure the few students staying there weren't setting anything on fire. The place had a history, but I didn't think much of it. After all, ghosts don't exist, right? The building had 3 floors, but only the ground level was technically in use. The second and third had been closed off for decades due to a fire back in the 70s, an electrical fault, they said, that burned out most of the top 2 floors. There was still visible damage in some parts. Charring on the stairwell walls warped metal banisters, half-melted light fixtures. The upper floors were locked, but my master key could technically open them if needed. I had no reason to go up there, or so I thought. The first time I heard the whispering, it was about 2 weeks into the semester. It was just after 2 a.m. I'd been sitting at the front desk near the entrance, reading, when a sound drifted down the hallway. A voice, no, multiple, voices, low, indistinct, like someone having a hushed conversation behind a wall. I paused, listening hard. The voices continued, murmuring rhythmically like chanting, or perhaps just fragments of arguments, bleeding through layers of concrete and plaster. I checked the hallway. Nothing. The building was dead silent otherwise. Every door shut. No lights on, under any thresholds. Assuming it was just the wind, or a trick of the old pipes, I went back to my book. But the next night it happened again. This time, I could make out something more. Specific. Words. Disconnected. Disjointed. Like, he's here again. Don't go up, it's waiting. That last one chilled me. I stood up, flashlight in hand, and walked the length of the corridor. Still nothing. I radioed campus security, just in case someone had broken in. They checked the building. No signs of entry, no heat signatures upstairs, nothing on the security cams. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. Something was watching. I started keeping a journal. Not because I thought I was losing my mind, but because I needed some way to track the weirdness. Each night, the whispers came earlier, a little louder. They seemed to echo from the ceiling, directly above the front desk where I sat for most of my shift. The locked second floor. By the third week, things escalated. On a Thursday night, I was making my usual 2 a.m. rounds. As I passed room 107, I noticed the door was cracked open. That was odd. No one was supposed to be staying there. I checked my list. 107 was marked as unassigned. I knocked gently. RA on duty, hello. No answer. I opened the door. The room was dark, lit only by moonlight seeping in through the broken blinds. It smelled like dust and old wet wood. The bed was unmade, though the sheets were folded. Nothing seemed disturbed until I saw the walls. All 4 walls were covered in scratches. Not writing, not claw marks, just erratic, looping lines gouged deep into the drywall, as if someone had spent hours circling the room with a knife, dragging it over and over again. I backed out slowly and locked the door behind me. When I asked about the room the next morning, the hall manager brushed it off. Old damage, she said, probably from before the renovation efforts. Maintenance will patch it up. I tried to explain that it looked fresh. She looked at me strangely, like she knew something but didn't want to say. That night I heard my name in the whispers, clear as day, a woman's voice, software close. Mark. It stopped me cold. I hadn't told anyone about what I'd been hearing. Not a soul. I stared up at the ceiling, heart pounding. The ceiling fan was still. The pipes silent. And yet the voice had been unmistakable. It had said my name. I couldn't sleep. I sat up in the common room, coffee in hand, until dawn. That weekend I decided to break the rules. I waited until just past 3 a.m., the hour everything felt thick with silence, and unlocked the stairwell to the second floor. I stepped into the darkness and closed the door behind me. The air was different. Heavy. Cold. The stairs creaked beneath my feet as I climbed. The flashlight beam barely cut through the gloom. Everything was coated in a fine layer of ash and soot. Blackened walls, melted wiring, charred doors. As I moved down the hallway, the whispering returned. Not behind me, not in front of me, all around me. He sees us. You shouldn't be here. Mark. I reached the end of the corridor and saw a door slightly ajar. Room 213. Inside, the air was colder still. The floor was covered in debris. I could see the outline of something on the wall. Scratches like in 107, but these were deeper, wider, spelling something. I raised my light. It read, "No one leaves." I spun around at the sound of footsteps, but no one was there. I ran, down the stairs, out of the building, into the night air. I didn't care about protocol or write-ups. I didn't even go back for my coat. I just kept running until I reached the main campus security office. When I told them what happened, they looked at me like I'd gone mad. But the next morning, I got a call from the hall manager. She wanted to meet. She told me about a fire in the 70s, the one I already knew about. But what no one had told the students was the cause. It wasn't faulty wiring. A student had snapped, locked himself in room 213, lit his mattress on fire, and blocked the exits on the upper floors. 5 students died. The fire had been ruled accidental to avoid scandal. But unofficially, everyone knew what had happened. The survivor? He'd said he did it because the walls told him to, that they wouldn't stop whispering. The university didn't want to attract attention, so they sealed the upper floors. Quietly moved on. I quit the RA job a few days later. But the story didn't end there. A month after I left, heard from a friend still living on campus. Another RA, a guy named Jason, took over my shift. Within 3 weeks, he stopped showing up to class. When they finally checked on him, they found his journal. Pages and pages about whispering voices, about something watching him. The last entry just said, "They know I can hear them." Dunley Hall has been permanently closed now, officially for renovations. But I still dream about the voices, about the walls. And sometimes, when everything is quiet, I swear I can hear my name being whispered in the dark. Story 3. I've never been the type to buy into ghost stories or supernatural talk. Honestly, I always thought the tales of haunted campuses were exaggerated. College folklore. Stories cooked up to scare freshmen and spice up late-night conversations. But something happened during my 3rd year at Greystone University that I still can't explain. Something that changed my perspective forever. It started with a death. A student named Emily Hargrove died during the fall semester of 1976 in Ashcroft Hall, an older, ivy-draped building that now housed the psychology department, and a few unused dorm rooms on the top floor. Officially, it was ruled an accident. A gas leak in her room. Faulty ventilation. She went to sleep and never woke up, but students whispered about other things. About how she'd been acting strangely in the weeks before. How she claimed someone was watching her, whispering to her. Some even said she'd tried to warn the staff about something in her room. They all said the same thing. She knew she was going to die. Fast forward to my time on campus. My friends and I were part of a student paranormal club, not because we were true believers, but more out of boredom and a shared fascination with weird stories. We'd spend weekends exploring off-limits parts of campus, recording EVP sessions, and trying out ghost hunting gadgets we bought off eBay. It was all just for fun, until Ashcroft. The building had this odd presence about it, cold even on warm days, with a strange echo to its halls, like sound bounced around too much. There were rumors that the top floor, where Emily had died, had been sealed after her death. But we knew a maintenance door at the back that could still get you in. It was a Thursday night when we decided to investigate. There were 4 of us. Me, Nate, Tasha, and Jules. We waited until close to midnight before slipping in through the old service entrance. The bottom floor of Ashcroft was still used, for classes. So we kept quiet until we reached the main stairwell. Immediately we felt it. The temperature dropped. Not like normal night air, but something unnatural. My breath fogged even though it was early September. "Just old pipes," Nate whispered, trying to keep it light. But none of us responded. We crept up to the third floor, flashlight beams trembling slightly in our hands. The moment we crossed onto that landing, everything changed. The air was dense, pressurized almost, like we were underwater. The hallway was dark, long, abandoned. The doors were numbered but scratched and faded. Room 313, Emily's room, was at the very end. As we moved, we started hearing it. Low at first, almost like the building was breathing. A soft intake, then a sigh. I stopped in my tracks. "Did you guys hear that?" Jules nodded, wide-eyed. "Yeah, and it wasn't the wind." Tasha, who had the most experience with our gear, pulled out a small audio recorder and started asking questions. "Is anyone here with us?" No response. "Emily, are you still here?" Nothing. Then on playback we heard it, a whisper, right after Tasha spoke, so faint we could barely make it out. But it was there. "Don't trust." My heart started pounding. Nate laughed nervously. "It's probably feedback or something." But we all knew it wasn't. When we reached room 313, the door was slightly ajar. Just a crack. I pushed it open. The room was undisturbed. Dust blanketed every surface. The bed frame was bare. A broken desk sat in the corner. The window was boarded over. On the wall above the bed, I saw something that made me freeze. Scratched into the plaster as if by fingernails. I tried. Tasha was already recording again. "Emily, what did you try to do? Were you trying to warn someone?" This time, the answer came before she could hit playback. A loud bang from the hallway, then footsteps, heavy, deliberate. They started at the far end and came closer, one by one. We backed into the room instinctively, and Nate slammed the door shut. We stood there, barely breathing, listening. The footsteps stopped just outside. Then came the knock. 3 slow knocks. Nate reached for the door handle. "Don't," I whispered, grabbing his arm. But he opened it. The hallway was empty. The air was still. And yet we all felt it. Something had changed. We decided to leave. As we headed back down the stairs, Jules pointed something out. Every mirror we passed was cracked. Some were shattered completely, like they had been punched from the inside. I didn't sleep that night. The next day, we went to the campus archives. Tasha had a theory that maybe there was more to Emily's death than we'd been told. What we found chilled us to the bone. Emily wasn't the first. In 1963, a girl named Caroline Dunst died in the same room. Room 313, overdose, supposedly. In 1951, a male student, William Granger, hung himself in that room. And in 1939, the building was used as an infirmary during a flu outbreak. Several students died, including one who was locked in room 313 after exhibiting erratic behavior and screaming about voices in the walls. There was a pattern. And that's when we realized something horrifying. Every 12 to 15 years, someone died in that room. Alone. Often under strange circumstances. The school had changed the function of the building multiple times, but the deaths kept happening. Always room 313, it was like something lived there, fed off isolation. We went back one more time, driven by a mixture of fear and obsession. We needed to know what was there. We set up cameras, recorders, even EMF detectors. And then we waited. Around 2:17 a.m., the EMF meter spiked. The air grew cold again. The walls began to whisper. Not just noise this time. Words, he comes when they're alone. They see him in dreams. The room is his now. Suddenly, the camera feed went static. All of them, one by one. And then the door to room 313 slammed shut behind us. No wind, no draft, just force. We ran. I don't remember how we got down the stairs. I just know we didn't stop until we were outside, gulping fresh air, shaking. We told the campus administration everything. They didn't laugh. Instead, they quietly told us the room had been sealed before, for a reason. That it wasn't on public record, but some staff knew there had always been something wrong with room 313, something they couldn't explain, something they didn't talk about. They sealed it again, permanently. But I still think about it, about the presence in that room, the history it carries, the cycle it repeats. Greystone is a beautiful campus, rich in tradition, bustling with life. But beneath it all, something dark lingers. A piece of the past that refuses to die. And if you ever find yourself in Ashcroft Hall, if you ever pass by the door marked 313, you might feel it too. That unseen presence. Waiting. So, what do you think? Are college campuses just places of learning? Or are they holding on to something darker? If you've ever experienced something unexplainable during your time on campus, strange whispers, ghostly figures, that lingering feeling of being watched, I want to hear your story. Drop it in the comments below and let's compare notes. And if these stories sent a chill down your spine, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and hit the bell so you never miss another true horror encounter. Because sometimes the past doesn't stay buried, especially on campus. Until next time, stay curious and stay in the light.